Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder. It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the nutrition heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Nutrition Heretic podcast. This is Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. Today we are going to touch on something that affects all of us that's not food, but in some ways you might think of it as food for your skin, although it doesn't really feed your skin, but it is something that's going to go on your skin and we all hopefully use it. It's called soap. Some time ago, I just moved to Hawaii 2.5 years ago now, and when I was in New Jersey, I used to make soap maybe once or twice a year, and it was really easy because I made it from lye, and lye heats up tremendously when it touches water, and what I would do is I would just stick it outside because it was always cold. That doesn't happen here as often. So, but one of the things that kept happening when I started making soap, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it is because it is more natural. It is what our ancestors have done for centuries to remove dirts from our skin. Some people are against that. They want to oil themselves and scrape that off, but take that to the bank. And then there's other people like, I remember some time ago, I went to a nutrition conference and there was a woman there selling liquid soap. And she was telling me how liquid soap was the only kind of soap that you should use on your skin because of the alkalinity and the whatever. And really try to put fear into me about not using my own homemade product. And I'm sure that many of you, especially if you've gotten into soap making, have gotten a lot of these things. Don't use things on your body that you're not going to put into your body that you wouldn't eat. Again, are there limits on that? Is there something else that we can do? So what I decided was that I was going to invite my friend Dana Christenson from Big Island Soap Company. She is a soap maker like none other that I have seen. And we're you'll find out why in just a moment. Welcome to the show, Dana.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Dana, what do you think about this whole liquid versus solid soap? Am I doing myself such harm when I use your soap? Not that you're going to say that your product is bad, or my soap, which was made in the same way that you make yours.
Yeah. Personally, I don't like paying for water, so I don't like liquid soap. It's also more frequently a detergent, and more chemicals are added because of that. I really like the solid bar soap. It's moisturizing, gentle on the skin, and the kind of soap that I make is only all natural with no added, no chemicals. Of course, we do use lye, as all soap. You have to use lye if you're going to have soap. So there's that. But other than that, it's fragrant.
Right. And this is an issue, I think, for a lot of people because we hear words like lye and we think of gasping for air. We think that it's so dangerous. It's this
right.
horrible thing. Yes, in its raw form, especially when you just add water to dry lye, it's extremely caustic.
Exactly.
So is stomach acid, right?
Exactly.
So, provided that you have enough stomach acid. But there's also something that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, which is that lye changes its form and it mellows out basically, and it's not that caustic
That's exactly right.
Substance anymore once you cure it with the fats.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's just the fats. It's the water and the fat that you add to it, and creates that emulsification.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right. The lye molecules combined with the acid, the fatty acids, the fats or oils that you're using, and it changes to an entirely different molecule. You're no longer left with the original fats that you used, and you're no longer left with the lye. You now have a soap molecule, and that's the process of saponification.
Right. And so if it was dangerous, then you wouldn't be able to undo that process and get your original ingredients. Right.
Exactly.
It's like baking a cake. You can't pull the eggs out later.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So you're saying that to be true soap, it must contain lye.
That's correct.
What's the crap they sell in the supermarket?
They are usually marketed as either detergents or cleansing bars or beauty bars and things like that. And it's because they use different surfactants to create what we know as a lathering, cleansing, either liquid or solid. So they add different chemicals that produce a larger, fluffy lather, or cleansing agents that do bind with dirt and oils and rinse away, but it's not actually soap.
Oh, okay. Okay. So when people say I'm going to go buy some soap, or
right,
wash your mouth out with soap, whatever.
Usually
it's beauty bar.
Yes, usually it is, exactly. And that's where the terminology can get confusing. You think soap and you think, it could be laundry soap, it could be dish soap, it could be body soap, face soap. Only a very small percentage of those are actually soap.
Is Ivory actually soap?
Ivory is actually
right.
soap.
That's the only one that is. Because does your soap float? That's another. I have a shower. What does your soap float? That was their whole marketing thing.
Yep, it does. And not as high. So I think Ivory soap, they the way they make it so white and lightweight is when they're making it, they whip a lot of air into it too, so it floats higher. But yeah, it does.
Actually, I used a blender to make my soap because it took less time to do it in the blender than to stir it by hand.
I do too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what are the differences? Like we talk about, there's the glycerin soaps, which are usually those kits that they give little kids, or Martha Stewart puts out, right? Those kind of things. There's glycerin, and then there's a hot process and a cold process. Can you describe where those three things line up against each other?
If it's 100% glycerin, that is glycerin that has been extracted from other soap. Glycerin is a natural byproduct of the saponification process. Those molecules combine together, you're left with soap and some glycerin. And a lot of the companies that sell beauty bars and things make most of their money by extracting the glycerin that they make through the first bar of soap, selling that as a block of glycerin to somebody else, and then adding the other surfactants, chemicals, and things to replace those moisturizing qualities of the glycerin because it's more profitable for them. So glycerin soap is more expensive. And if you want to talk about the negatives and positives of glycerin, we can do that too. But for this right now, there's the glycerin hot process, cold process. So hot and cold process are very similar. It's just pretty much the time that is required that separates them. Like you said, the lye creates its own heat when it's added with the water. And we use that heat, under the right temperature frame to then either choose whether you're going to do hot process or cold process. If you're going to do cold process, you add the lye water to your fats. You keep it generally cooler than you would hot process, adding no artificial heat. You're only using the heat that's created by the lye water.
Okay.
And then, so you, just like you're saying, stick blender, some kind of blender, blend it really well, and then you just let it sit after it's molded. And that takes a longer time, takes longer to cure, because the lye slowly saponifies with the oils. If you add more heat after the lye water's been combined, then that's the hot process. That's much faster. I choose to use that method because I can control every little step, and when I want it to saponify, when I want to add my extra oils or my essential oils for the fragrance. So that's the large difference, is the time that's required, and the temperature, dictates that. Okay.
Now, let's go back to glycerin, because I hate glycerin soap.
Yeah.
Why? It's it makes me feel dirtier. It leaves this nasty slick on my skin. It just feels really sticky and really unpleasant. So it's pretty laughable that it costs more.
I know. And it's because, glycerin is an emollient. It attracts moisture to your skin, and a little bit of that is great. I know, but too much of it, and then you're left with that sticky, slimy, feeling that you like kind of can't rinse off. The other reason I don't like it is because since it does attract moisture, have you ever like opened, and they're usually transparent, right? The glycerin soaps. So have you ever opened a glycerin soap, put it in the shower, don't even use it, and then you come back later if it's a humid day and it looks like it was rained on.
Yes.
It has all these. Yes. And
that mucky mess. Nasty.
Exactly. It sticks to your soap dish, it dissolves away, and you're like, why did I just pay twice as much for something that's going to last half as long? Yeah, so that's the trouble with glycerin soap. A lot of people like it because they can say that it's a non-animal soap, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't originally come from that. It's just, what's left over. And I think the reason they can say that is because, like we kind of talked about, the molecules change. It's no longer, like if you use tallow in your soap, it's no longer tallow once it's been saponified.
Right.
So then they don't need to say that this glycerin came from an animal.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's so loaded, and it just reminded me as you were talking about this concept of not putting anything that you can't eat on your skin. If you have real soap in your house, mice will eat it.
Right.
And you have
exactly, right?
I have many a time left some soap drying to find that they had little tooth marks in it.
Yes. Well, they're clean from the inside out.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, they love it. And so I think that's actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
So it is, and from that standpoint, I think that animals have more wisdom than we do about what they put in their bodies.
Oh, they can tell the difference.
I'm not, dining on soap tonight. Not even yours. But at the same time, I do feel that it's a pretty interesting indicator.
Yeah.
It reminds me also of a friend of mine who she was staying at her parents' house. She was in between homes or whatever. And so she had her shelf in the cabinet of her real food. And then her parents had the shelf right above it with their Kicks and whatever other, breakfast cereals and yada yada crackery, whatever. They never touched that. They ate her food. They ate my friend's food because her food was in its real form.
Yeah.
So,
much more appealing.
Stuff like that. Yeah. So, you talked about tallow. Tell us about your choice to use tallow, because one thing that we're always talking about on this show is the fact that people are always looking for, whenever they want to be healthy, they think they have to move away from animal products and they have to start using the vegetable oils. And as a matter of fact, speaking of vegetable oil, last time I tried to use glycerin and soap, I actually got it from somebody's car, when they made fuel for their car, and glycerin was the byproduct of that. And so he gave me a bunch of glycerin. I played with it, but that's another thing to keep in mind about vegetable oil. But why did you choose to use tallow? Why an animal fat?
Yeah, I'm a proud user of tallow, and I will never use anything else. First off, the quality that you get from the bar. It's a harder bar. It's a longer lasting bar. It's a more mild cleansing. If you use something like coconut oil, which is great, it's extremely stripping. You have to add either a whole lot of other oils at the end to, compensate for the fact that you're stripping away all of your own. But so the tallow doesn't do that. And I also really like it because I can get it local, it's sustainable. It's a product that nobody else is using, out of that animal. And, you can't really beat that. I mean, you're using the waste product from,
it's waste to, it's waste to people who will no longer eat it.
Right, exactly.
And it's ridiculous that we look down on these, you take advantage of the whole animal. If it's going to be slaughtered, let's use as much as we can. And our society is too hell-bent on just these choice cuts and the choice pieces of this for using that and doing whatever. And we've got to chemically derive every ingredient to make our soap now because we're too lazy to. And actually, it's probably much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I cut out so many steps by using tallow. I mean, it's unbelievable. The alternative is something like palm oil, which we'll talk about later, but that has to be grown somewhere else, shipped here, and and then you have to take these different kind of steps to try to make back what you're losing by not using something like tallow or lard. From
I
pigs.
made mine. I always made mine with lard. Sometimes from tallow if I could get enough of it.
Exactly.
But I loved my lard soap, and I love your tallow soap, and that's why we're friends.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
So don't change that formula or else.
No, not a chance. I mean, I've tried so many different formulas, and unfortunately people really want, the general market. And I believe that it's more of an ignorance thing, and no fault of theirs. I mean, I only learned about all of this after I started making soap and, trying to pick the best way, all natural, local, sustainable, making the right choices wherever I could. That's what kind of brought all this to light for me. And I mean, people in general want an all vegetable soap, but they don't realize the environmental damages associated with that. They don't realize the large number of chemicals that's frequently put into it to compensate for what you're losing by not using the animal fats. And that goes the same for like goat milk soap and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I think when people take that it has to be all vegetable route, they also don't realize I don't want to say that they don't realize, they maybe choose to ignore, because I think these people are savvy enough to know that it exists. They have to make an excuse now to have to throw away plastic is what I'm getting at.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because these are not ingredients that you can make yourself in your backyard. Nobody's squeezing corn for oil or what have you, or canola.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, I don't know if you ever tried making soap with canola.
Nope.
A friend of mine who made goat milk soap with lard in Pennsylvania, she tried to do it once with canola oil. She said it would not set.
Yeah.
It's not even a real plant.
Mm-hmm.
It's a genetically modified plant.
Absolutely.
Which a lot of people don't realize. And she said out of all the vegetable oils, it was the absolute worst for a soap attempt. And she tried many times and talked to other people, and if they did get it at all to set to some extent, it would dimple and do very weird, unnatural things.
Yes.
Which is pretty much a testament to what it is.
Yeah, for
right?
for sure. A lot of the vegetable soaps, because what you need a combination of oils or fats, of any variety, whether it's animal or plant-based, that have stearic acid, which is a hard fatty acid. And
short chain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And liquid fats, and that's, like olive oil, anything that is liquid at room temperature is a liquid fat. And it's really hard when you're making a vegetable soap. It's really hard to combat that. You either need a whole lot of coconut oil, and then again compensate for the stripping qualities that it has. I mean,
and what would compensate? Would it be something like a shea butter?
Yeah, shea butter. Yeah, or adding
tallow.
Tallow, exactly. Or adding more oils at the end after the saponification has taken place. And we call that super fatting.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did that once.
Exactly. And I do it with all my recipes, and I feel like most people that want the vegetable recipes, it's because they don't like the idea of rubbing cow fat on their face, and that just freaks them out.
Well, see, and that turns me on.
And that's why we're friends.
Ooh, hello. So tell me about, you talked about using essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
Before we got on air, we were talking, obviously, and you said something about the commercial soaps don't use essential oils. They use fragrance. What the hell is fragrance?
Oil. That's exactly what you have to be asking yourself. If you're concerned with this kind of thing, what the heck is a fragrance oil? What does that mean? It's a synthetic blend of chemicals designed to make your nose think it's smelling orange or, jasmine or something like that.
So it's the equivalent of the dyes that go into food or the natural flavors.
Right.
Those mysterious natural spices.
Yes. What kind of natural flavors?
My foot is a natural flavor.
Right. Yeah. But you don't want to be eating that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So and you use.
I use only essential oils.
Essential oils. Now we're going to take this a step further. Essential oils. Do people want therapeutic grade? Is pure enough?
Right.
So
for something like soap, I choose to use an edible version of essential oils, but that's by choice. You don't need to for soap. All of the oils that I use are organic, or organically derived from organically grown plants, right? And they're just the plant matter distilled, pressed. Then you're left with that oil. I forgot the question that you asked me. Take two.
Is there a difference between the therapeutic versus the pure essential oils?
Right.
Because we've distinguished the fragrance oils from the essential oils. So within the therapeutic grade, the pure, and there's something else in between.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Complete or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Is one preferable to another?
I believe it has to do with two different things. The equipment that they use, because of course standards for something edible is going to be much more, expensive to produce. And if your market is not for feeding these people essential oils, if it's for, things like soap and lotions and body butters, then, a lot of companies that distill their own oils don't want to go that extra, extra mile to get that done. The other thing is some plants require like a solvent of some kind to extract the oil, and that's the only other option that I can think of.
What would that solvent be? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure. It might even be something like lye, but because they use lye to cure oranges, like mandarin oranges, make bagels, pretzels, all sorts of things. But
pass the lox.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. So then you also touched on legal issues of calling something soap.
Yes.
What's that all about? Why?
It's a little complicated because you are not legally obligated to list the ingredients in what is called soap, which I don't understand. I mean, everybody deserves to know what the heck is in what they're buying and putting on themselves.
And especially in this day and age when people are reacting so violently many times and having anaphylactic reactions just by inhaling certain things.
Exactly.
We should need to know that, but I guess there's not that much actual soap on the market anyway. So.
I know, but yes, technically, in order for somebody to call anything soap, it needs to be a combination between an alkali base like lye and acids like fats and oils, and then you can call it soap. Anything else, that's why we find beauty bars and cleansing bars and things like that, because a lot of times they're not actually soap. They didn't actually combine these two to make soap, so the molecules aren't technically soap. They're detergents.
Okay.
So that's where that comes in. And the ingredients listing, I want to know what I'm buying, so I put it on my ingredients list. But a lot of times you'll look and it just says handmade natural soap.
Right.
What does that really mean?
Right, exactly. And this is an important distinction to make because it's easy for, I know that a lot of our listeners, they are Googling what to use on my body now that I'm not using these heavy, nasty chemicals. Right. But there's not really a lot of alternatives. And then you're telling us, that there's not even a standard.
Exactly.
Just like the word nutritionist doesn't really have a standard.
A huge gray area. Yeah. There is no standard. There's no way, you have to rely on your soap maker. And that's why it's important.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's why it's important just to know the person making your soap as much as you know the person growing your vegetables, raising your meat, milking your cows or goats, whatever.
Yeah, you find a good source of that, a person who makes soap the way you want it to be made, that lists the ingredients that they use and that you trust, and,
start up a conversation. Because one thing I have found over the years is that people who do the things that you don't want to happen, whether it's in your cosmetic products or your food, they would denigrate your choice to go green, be sustainable, use animal fats, whatever, before they would actually lie to you.
Yeah.
It's like their ego gets the best of them and they can't compute. And they're like, well, that's stupid. Why would you do that? And then you say, well, you. I'm not buying your product. Exactly. I'm going somewhere else. So let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about making soap at home, because you make soap and you sell soap, and we'll tell you how to get in touch with her at the end if you want to buy some of her soaps, which, by the way, I buy them now because I don't have to make them because I have her. And I like to support my local people. But making soap at home, because I'm sure there's other people here who have tried to make soap or are thinking about making it just as a craft, something maybe they can do with their kids, something maybe they even want to start a business. What are some of the other tips? Because we talked about the basic process.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that people may want to know? We know that about the fats, the coconut oil. What about essential oils? When's the best time to add an essential oil?
Yeah. So there is some wiggle room in that area, and depending on whether or not you're doing hot or cold process, or even melt and pour, which is basically the blocks of glycerin soap. They do make blocks of other soap that you can then melt down and then add your own colors or essential oils at the end after it's liquid. And then you set it up, in a mold and let that set and get hard. I choose to add my essential oils at the very end. And again, I do hot process. So I combine 100% of the lye that it takes, or I should say, I combine the lye water mixture with in a way that saponifies 100% of the fats that I'm using. And
so no glycerin byproduct.
Well, no, there still is
actually.
Is? Okay. Yeah. So that's a natural byproduct of just saponification in general. Well, no, see, it's mixed in though. It doesn't rise to the top. It's none of that. Yeah, I see. It's mixed in. It's that's right. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. Go on.
But yeah, so once you mix that and everything is saponified, I do that because, just like I was saying, a lot of people don't like the idea of rubbing unsaponified tallow on their face, right? And whatever, I can understand that. So I make sure that all of my oils are saponified, and then at the very end, after that saponification has taken place, or as we call it, come to trace, which just means the liquid is thicker, and it leaves a trace. When you bring the stick blender up and you drag it across the top, it sits on the top for a minute, kind of like pudding consistency.
Yes, I was going to say, yeah.
So after that, I let it cook in the crock pot. That's what I use because I also do it in my kitchen.
Yeah.
So I let it cook in the crock pot for about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the batch that I'm making and the size of it. And then, so the saponification is now done. The lye has been combined. Those molecules have changed. Now I add my super fats. And I use coconut oil and extra virgin olive oil. Okay. And, both organic. The reason I do that is because I can control, coconut oil is so good for your skin in its unsaponified form, right?
Right.
It's a little ironic that it's so moisturizing when it's not saponified and so stripping when it is, but it's because 100% of that oil is saponified when you add the lye. First, I add the super fats, and then I add the essential oils, and that's pretty much the last step right before the end, because the oils have different flash points. So that means if your soap is 212 degrees and your ylang-ylang essential oil has a flash point of 206, you need to bring that down or wait until it's cool enough. That way you get all of your essential oil. You're not evaporating that into nothingness. So you have to wait for the right temperatures.
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on, because I think in my previous experience, some people, home soap makers would add the essential oils too early, and then it would evaporate, like you said.
Exactly.
And so they're just kind of wasting their money. And
especially
if you're doing the food grade.
Yeah, exactly.
So for every, I don't know, I don't even know what the smallest batches that you've ever made, every quart of liquid,
well, mine are about 34 ounces. It's maybe for 34 ounces, I use, depending on the essential oil, between 1 ounce and 1.5 ounces in an entire loaf, and that gives me 12 bars, at roughly 3-4 ounces a piece. That's, in my opinion, the way to do it. I choose to do it like that. When you're doing cold process and you're adding essential oils, you have to add them in the beginning when you add the lye, because you don't touch it again after that, which is why it's important to bring that temperature down in the beginning, and you don't want to add any extra heat. Unfortunately, since your essential oils are oils, some of that is saponified when you're doing, the cold process with the lye.
I just remembered there was one thing that I remembered reading about needing to use more essential oils when you use animal fat than when you use vegetable oil. Is that true, or is that a myth?
It is a myth. I think
it's just another way the man is trying to keep us from using animal fats.
I think that myth stemmed from at least a couple different things, but the one that comes to mind most is that people say that your animal fat soap, whether it's tallow or lard, has a smell afterwards. So they add more to compensate for that. But if your soap maker knows what they're doing, then it does not have any smell. I mean, there's so little smell to start with. I mean, it's like
And then
barely
by the
there.
time the lye gets at it.
Exactly. And it's changed. It's not tallow
Yeah.
anymore. It's not lard anymore. It doesn't smell like the pig, doesn't smell like the cow, because it's not the pig or the cow.
I love the smell of lard.
Yes, me too. It's almost a shame it doesn't linger.
It's like pie, soap.
Yeah,
It's
right?
delicious. Okay, so that's a myth. Yeah,
Yep.
pretty much figured.
Yeah,
Because I was always just too cheap to use more, so I
Mhm.
never did, and I never had any problem with it maintaining that
Right.
smell over time.
No,
I still
exactly.
have a few bars that my husband had shipped over here
Mhm.
recently that I made probably 3 years ago, and they still smell great. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only thing you have to add more to is the cold process, and that's because a small portion of your essential oils are eaten up by the lye. And that's the only reason you need a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of your favorite things to add to soap other than essential oils, exfoliants, clays?
Exactly. I love, so the colorants that I use are only all natural colorants. I use everything from activated charcoal to spirulina algae, red clay, coffee grounds, orange peels, oatmeal. I mean, the list goes on and on. Turmeric is a wonderful one. Both the smell and the color is just beautiful.
See, what I love about that too is particularly for us in Hawaii, but even to some extent, you get oranges in New Jersey, or we're both from New Jersey, and there's so many things around you that you can just add to your soaps. It's coffee grounds, it's cornmeal, it's if you have maybe a loofah that you're not using.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, I have a friend that back east, he has a juniper tree. He uses the juniper berries ground up. They add a nice smell, wonderful exfoliant.
Gin.
Yes, yeah, right.
The smell of gin on your body. Awesome. Okay, now this is the other reason I'm gonna confess that I like to buy your soap. Your soap looks pretty.
Why, thank you.
I never could get mine to mold properly. I tried everything from the shoebox lined with plastic wrap or whatever to the actual soap molds that crack to the silicone soap.
Yes.
Or not soap, like candy cake muffin, whatever mold.
Exactly, yeah.
I've tried a bunch of them and they still look like crap. What am I doing wrong?
Well, so I had to experiment a little bit too. I started out with a box that I, screwed together, in the dimensions that I want, was cutting them by hand. But man, that was such a pain with lining it with wax paper and taping it. And then like the liquid soap leaks in around the corners and it's stuck and, just too difficult. So I eventually did graduate to the rectangular silicone molds that are flexible. But I think the key is when you add it. And that's one thing with the hot process that you really have to be on top of. You can't let it get too dry or too hard because the heat, not only does it make the moisture evaporate, but then once you're cooling it, ready for the essential oils, if too much moisture is already evaporated and then you're bringing your temperature down, that soap is starting to set already. So you're going to get cracks and crumbles and air pockets. But if you...
I never really had the cracks and crumbles and air pockets. It came in like the unmolding and the cutting, like I would cut it and I tried like the cheese wire and then it would still be like not a clean cut. There would be that little extra piece that would stick somewhere.
Right. Yeah, so in my soap cutter, once I add that into the mold and unmold it, and that's the other thing, so the hot process, I can unmold really only a few hours after I set it. As soon as it cools, it's solid enough to be unmolded, and then I wait a day and then I cut it. But I also made my own soap cutter, which is not necessary. I did it just because with the volume of soap and everything, but I think a small straight blade is the way to go. The wires sounds like a great idea, but it's flexible, so then you get the slight, wiggle back and forth.
And then unless you can make that look consistent and intentional, it looks like
exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Straight thin blade with something
so
on
like
either end.
A
guillotine. That's exactly what I made. Yeah, because both sides of my blade are under control, and I just put downward pressure, and it cuts them straight every time.
Nice.
It might not be perfectly even, but they're straight.
like my haircut. Okay. And the last thing I wanted to ask you about was reducing waste when it comes to soap, because you always get those little nubs at the very end, and I never want to throw those out.
Right.
Now, I have a friend who also used to make soap, totally different person, totally used to make her own soap. She owned a farm, and she would put them in like an old a leftover pump soap bottle with some water, and then use that as liquid soap for washing her hands. I thought that was brilliant.
That's a great idea.
Are there other things that you recommend? Can you use it as detergent for your clothes? Like what?
If it's a moisturizing body bar, I don't recommend using it as detergent for your clothes, because again, it has the super fat, so
That's
it has
true.
those oils in it. So your clothes might get a little bit of residue if you use it, only that for time and time again. You can double boil it in anything from like a coffee tin or anything, or a pot that you don't want to use again. I mean, you can still, it's just a little bit extra work cleaning it after that, but hey, it's soap already, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say it's soap. It's self-cleaning.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so just put it in with a little bit of water over a double boiler. If you're really on top of it, you don't need to double boil it. You could use a flame too, but then you might burn it if you're not paying close attention. So I recommend the double boiler, and you just liquefy it. All the little pieces, and even when I'm doing a rebatch soap, I chop them up into little pieces so it melts more consistently. But yeah, so melt it down. Get a piece of wax paper if you don't want to bother with a mold. Piece of wax paper inside of a cup, or just in a little cake tray, depending if you have, or like the little brownie bread pans or something like that. I also use muffin tins every now and then, because they make the little silicone muffin,
Actually, you just reminded me of something that I used to do. Is I would let it get to sort of Play-Doh consistency, and just make little balls and use those for guest soaps in the spare
That's exactly
bathroom.
right. I'm doing that for somebody right now. Because she was like, your bars are so gorgeous, but they last so long and they're so big. I need something tiny. So I'm making her smaller ones, doing exactly that. So I just get it to the right temperature. I slap it on the wax paper first, let it cool to the point where I can pick it up, and then just like you said, once it's Play-Doh, pack it into a ball or whatever shape you want. Right. And then go from there.
Awesome. Actually, now I'm going to ask you another question. I do this to everybody because I'm like, I have one question, and then wait a minute, wait, I have one more question. What is rebatching? You mentioned that, and I forgot to touch on that. We talked about rebatching versus milling. When do you use rebatching?
Yeah, so the only time...
And what is it?
It's basically reclaiming a lost or less than desirable batch of soap. The times that I have used it have been if I don't like the color of my soap, or if the consistency is wrong, if it's too dry and I put it into the mold. That happened in the beginning and it was crumbly. So then I was like, oh man, okay, heat it up, add a little bit more water, try again. Or if the fragrance isn't the right, if you have like too little fragrance and you can't smell it, you're trying to get away with as little as possible, and you're like, oh no, it really needs a little bit more. Rebatch it, melt it down, add some more, start over. Which is great about soap. If it's natural, actual soap, there's no such thing as lost soap. It could always be heated up, melted again, used again, molded again, colored again, scented again. Yeah, there's no reason to have soap waste. And I tell people, if you're not super dedicated to doing that, bring me your soap scraps, and I'll do it. Nice. Yeah. Because once you heat it up again, it doesn't matter what it was used for or on, or you bring it to above boiling, and then
Yeah, actually, as we talk, more memories are coming up for me, and not only with failed batches of soap, but with those little pieces that are left over. Sometimes what I would do is I would make just a plain bar, and sometimes I would scent it or color it or with clays or what have you, and then I would take those little scraps and put them in there. So when you'd slice it, you'd get these
the chunks,
pretty chunks in there. Which people pay top dollar for that in some stores, right? So that's another way that you can reuse those little pieces. But also with the rebatching, it's sort of I just screwed up some mayonnaise the other day, and I ended up, and then I screwed it up again. Like I went online and I was like, how do you save mayonnaise? And I did the thing, and it's totally screwed up again. So then I was like, okay, you just sit over there, and I did a good batch of mayonnaise, and then I gently poured in the failed batch and fixed it. And that's one of the things that I've done with soap as well. I've made a good batch, and then I just, very gradually added little bits
Yeah.
of the failed batch until I got what I, as much as I felt I could go without destroying the second.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it does, there's so many fun things you can do with soap like that in terms of the colors and everything. And that's a great way. And, the other thing too is you could put it in your, like if you're having like a hot bath, put those little soap chunks and shavings in the tub and let the hot water run over it. It's going to suds up and be like a really nice bubble bath. Yeah. I mean, people sell soap shavings and that's just like somebody else's either oops or like scraps or something, so just do it yourself.
Right. So it's very forgiving is what you're saying. And
sure is.
And I think as we get away from the kind of commercial purchase of soaps and things that are intended for particular uses, like you say, the bubble bath, like, oh, this one says bubble bath, so I can only use it as bubble bath.
Right.
That kind of mentality, as we get away from that, that's when we can unleash that creativity and start using just what we have around. It's
definitely break free, use your imagination. Yeah, absolutely. There was something else too that I wanted to mention earlier when you were asking me about the reasons I choose to use tallow.
Yes.
A huge one. First, it was the quality, but then as I learned more about that, I was concerned with supplying the vegan market and the people who were interested in the vegetable soaps, because they also, that's everybody's choice. They also deserve to have a good, quality bar that they know what's in it, all natural, all that stuff. And the more and more I was learning about it, your only other choices are pretty much, in terms of hard vegetable oils, are pretty much coconut oil, palm kernel oil, and palm oil. And the kernel and the palm is so terrible for the environment. It's conflict because so many people are concerned, for the animals, and they don't want to, it's not good for the animals. Well, the palm oil, which is such a heavily used vegetable oil in soap making, I mean, really in everything we eat. But
well, actually, I'm going to have a comment about that because I was able to interview Bruce Fife a few weeks ago. He's the guy who originally wrote the books on coconut and palm and stuff, mostly coconut. But he's visited a lot of these countries where palm oil is made, and it's not that according to him, what he's seen is that there isn't that environmental damage, and there isn't the human capital either, but it's a ploy of the soy industry.
Right.
Yeah, which you and I both know that the soy industry has been behind a lot of propaganda because they have lost so much market share to coconut and palm in recent years. So it's, there's two sides to that story.
For sure.
I personally have not seen either side. So I can't speak to it, but it is an interesting way of looking at it and re-examining and trying to figure out, well, who is telling us this? Where are these messages coming from? Because it might be coming from the same people who are using it. Oh no, it's not bad. Yeah, it could be. It could totally be a PETA propaganda for all I know.
Exactly. But you're totally right. There are two sides to the story, and they have they've made a lot of efforts in the recent years to be growing and selling, marketing sustainably sourced palm oil, which is really important because otherwise so much forest has been clear cut. The orangutans are in huge danger of extinction, and Indonesia, Malaysia's another huge one. I mean, all over the place now they're doing these palm oil plantations.
Right. But see, I don't know that's necessarily true, actually. From what I just remember, I read another article over the last week that was talking about putting the palm on the shoreline, and one of the things Bruce talks about is that palm tree, whether it's for coconut or the palm kernel, will last for 25 years. It will keep producing without raping the land for 25 years versus a soybean, which just damages acres and acres and acres and acres of topsoil and has to be replaced every year. So it's a little interesting to see how there's those two sides as well. Because I've seen other things that substantiate, and it wasn't, and that what was interesting too is that this article that I read wasn't being politically one way or another. It was just saying like, oh, we actually need to because the palm will protect the shorelines in a lot of these countries too. Yeah.
Well, so he sounds like he's right on his game, and that's absolutely right. So like all these efforts have been made, and people are now spending more time and more effort using it in the way that it should be used. Whereas before it was like quick, cheap, instant, whatever.
That's
clear cut this forest, plant it full of palms, and then 4 years later you finally get your first flower. Like you said, they last for a really long time, but in the meantime they're doing the same thing everywhere else. Cut, plant, cut, plant.
I think anytime we look at, and I am very bothered by the whole monocropping culture that we live in, because every time we find a new superfood and a new this, everybody's got to eat it. Well, the you demand it, somebody's going to supply it, for crying out loud.
Right.
So talked about this also on the show before. We have a kale shortage on the island because everybody freaking wants kale in everything they eat. And it's like nobody even knew what kale was a decade ago. For crying out loud.
It's
now
the new
it's like
thing.
it's the thing, and so and then next is the astaxanthin and the the krill and the so
exactly.
we always there's always some new superfood, and I do believe that 99% of the time there's some, whether it's environmental or human capital, to be paid on the other side of the planet for your bowl of quinoa, because nobody eats wheat anymore.
Right.
And because, we've just created a monster, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we now push everything to extremes, right? It's always like, it's black and white, this is good, this is bad. There's very little balance anymore. It makes it difficult.
It does make it difficult. And that's why, everybody eats kale, I eat spinach, Yeah,
exactly.
Bring a little bit of balance, because, there's, whenever somebody tells you that there's only one solution.
Right, it's not.
It's usually not the case.
Right.
It's more fear driven, or greed driven, and then they use fear to convince you to give them money.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
Well, Dana, anything else that you would? You said that you might be able to supply us with something for the home soap maker or other people who want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put a little more thought into it, but I can give a recipe, technique, and maybe one of each, hot and cold process. And I also have a vegetable bar for people. So if you are going to use palm oil, just use the sustainably sourced palm oil, and that's great. But I do have a recipe for a vegetable bar for those of us out there that want to go that direction, that doesn't use palm oil and uses beeswax instead as a hardener.
Nice.
So I can do that, and little bit of both.
Yeah. So maybe what I will do now is I will ask you, the listener, to comment on our Facebook page and let us know what you would like for Dana to supply you with, and I'll make sure that she gets it, even if I have to go to her house and stand over her while she does it. All right. Okay. All right. Well, Dana, thank you so much. In the report that she's going to put together, we'll have contact information for her. Otherwise, you can contact us at adrianhugh.com/help desk and let us know that you would like to get in touch with her, whether you'd like to purchase from her or follow her or get her website at Big Island Soap Company when it's ready, if you want to get on the list for that. So just let us know what you're thinking. As always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrian. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, well, we're going to have you back for something else. She keeps bees too, folks. So it'll be fun. Thanks again.
Thank you.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nikola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Linda Hansen. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter at NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you just want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Thanks.